Hi, hello, how you doing? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mariana, but you can call me Mari. And today we will be doing part 3 of all the books I read this year. Woo, woo. If you hear my boyfriend typing in the background, no you don't. No you don't. Today we will be continuing on the trend again about talking about all the books I've read so far this year. The first one I'm going to mention is very exciting for me to talk about because it is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This novel is the novel that I'm working on for my thesis. So I'm writing about this for my master thesis, and I am so happy I got to read this novel again this year. This is a wonderful Gothic novel about a Mexican woman, Noemi Taboada, who gets a very mysterious letter from her cousin Catalina, who went to live at a place called High Place a few weeks ago. And she is now sending letters about the place being haunted, about weird things happening to her. And Noemi is sent by her father to investigate what has happened there. And then we get this whole set of mysteries that need unraveling, and as you read the novel you start learning more. It is very much inspired in these older Gothic novels set in Victorian style homes, and what happens when you bring some more magical realism in the Latin American way, so Latin American magical realism into these stories. So Mexican Gothic, 5 out of 5 stars. I love it so much, and I am very excited to finish writing this thesis. Then I read We Are All Guilty Here by Karen Slaughter. And this was another one of the thrillers I read this year. This one was one of the better ones I've read so far. We followed a detective in a night where 2 girls have disappeared, leaving a very violent trace behind them. And she, unfortunately, had the chance to aid one of the girls on the night of the disappearance, but she was busy with her personal life, so she chose to ignore the girl, and then she went missing. So she's dealing with that, as well as having to figure out what happened to them. And we follow from her perspective as she interviews people in this small community, unraveling a lot of their secrets, and we start to see that things are not like they seem they are. This is in the mid-range when it comes to Karen Slaughter novels. I've got my favorites, I've got my least favorites. I would place this just in the middle. It is quite well written. I really like her style of thrillers. I feel like she's one of my favorite thriller authors, if not my favorite thriller author. And I plan on reading any novel she publishes. I know she's got one of the detective novel series that I started and I haven't finished yet, but eventually I'll get to it. And for now, these standalones are a good place to start when it comes to Karen Slaughter. If you're planning on picking up her works, this is a good novel to start with.
Welcome back. It's me and the frog. We're having a great time. Oh, that was wild. No, why are you in this? This is just my portion, right?
Wait.
I'm doing a setup. I feel like you're cute.
Hey everybody.
Hey.
Well,
wait, what's your gang called?
How you doing?
They're called How You Doing. Hey, how you doing? Nice.
I actually don't know. But
Mary's crew.
Sure.
No, I can't hear that. Anyway.
Yeah, I clearly brought somebody to do a review with me. Welcome to my channel, Kiancito.
Hi, everybody.
This is my boyfriend who was typing before, and now he is not.
I was working.
The reason I brought Kian to do a review with me is that we both read The Raven Scholar together.
Yeah.
We did a little buddy read.
We did a little buddy read. It was very cute.
It
was a good book.
It was a really,
well.
it was a really good book to buddy read. We kind of went on this sort of dynamic where I would read a little bit and then you would catch up, and then eventually we ended up, reading the same book almost at the same time. So
absolutely.
That was really nice.
Yeah, I tend to read far too fast for my own good. So I let her get ahead, and then
That is so true.
apples.
That is so true. It's like, oh, I'm like 5 chapters ahead, and then all of a sudden you have finished the book.
She goes to bed and I keep reading, and then the next one I'm like, I'm 5 chapters ahead now.
Yeah, that is the thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the book, hear another person's perspective on it as well. Just give a little synopsis, I guess. This book is about different animal groups, kind of organized into this society where we get ravens, we get bears,
tigers.
we get foxes.
Tigers very important.
Tiger
Fox
is very
cool.
important. And then from there are there's like an organized tournament where one of them will become the king or the queen once the king leaves because he is about to pass.
Yeah, I kind of saw it as it felt like sort of crime syndicates. It's like each animal is their own crime syndicate that the king uses for different purposes.
That is true. And they all have their own personalities. Of course, foxes are like cunning and then...
Cunning, but also sly and sneaky.
Yeah.
And then like those like bulls or something like that, where like they did all like the work and the upkeep and that sort of thing. It was very like sort of structured to like society, more so I think than in any other book I've read, even like Red Rising, where it's like very structured by color. Like this was just so personality based, because even in like, you know, Red Rising you have, I guess, personality differences within a group, but within like you know, you had differences obviously, but in this book, like all the ravens, I guess similar way to sort of like Harry Potter, or like of this archetype, which was like really interesting.
I think that's a good comparison that people could make in terms of like Harry Potter versus something like skill, because I think Red Rising is a little bit more about skill, but this is more about personality traits.
Yeah, and I think where Harry Potter is very general, like, you know, like Gryffindor's courage, like this isn't like, oh, ravens are like smart and booky. It's like, you know, they have a whole host of personality traits that they kind of stick with, which is really, really cool.
What they help with in terms of the government structure, which I think is important as well. And then we follow the main character, Nima, who is a raven, a high scholar, who is kind of working alongside the king, helping with the politics.
Research
but then something happens along the way that we learn about, that she kind of interferes. The opening chapter of this book is incredible. Let's just say that. It's very shocking.
Gripping, and it kind of makes you
very shocking.
Want to know what happens, and then it skips a certain amount of time, and you're like, oh my god, but you can't do that. But in a good way. It's not like unsatisfying, but it is like shock factor, but played really, really well. And Nima, you know, sort of is in the middle of that in a very separated way, and it shows, I guess, how she came out of it, and then it ends up with, you know, the king has decided he is, I guess, stepping down, and is holding a tournament to find the next successor.
Exactly.
And it has to be one representative from each sort of class of animals, basically.
And that's interesting because we get a time jump at the very beginning of the book, and then we see how these two main characters are, how their relationship kind of develops over those years. And also, I kind of was interested to see if this would follow the romantasy route, but it didn't.
Which
it was very much, it was very much like a high fantasy novel with a little bit of romance, but very little of it, I think. And it's more about politics, about the world building. The magic system is quite interesting, and we get some very cute animals as well.
We get some very cute animals,
companions.
And I love like a hard magic system where, you know, there's like you can try to figure out what, I guess, they're the main characters are going to like use to get out of a situation. But in the Raven Scholar, which is surprising for me, I don't think it was that strict of a magic system. You didn't really know what, I guess, kind of powers or abilities they had, but it was very, very unique in a good way, but in a way that wasn't very understandable, I guess, which is unusual for me because I didn't really like that sort of stuff. But for this book, it really, really worked.
Yeah, definitely more like magical realism rather than hard fantasy. Absolutely,
yeah. You know, like magic was sort of integrated into the world in such a smooth, seamless way that it wasn't like, oh, they are using a magical spell now, like it may be in other books, but in a way that it was still obviously unusual, but it was really, really interesting.
And
especially with like the one animal group who was like separated from all the others, where they are much more sort of classic, like mysterious, like, oh, we don't know how they're doing this stuff, and no, it's interesting to see everyone's perspective on them, and then also, you know, from there.
Yeah, and tournaments as well. That sort of tournament book that Kiancito really likes.
I love a good, just like educational, like, you know, if they're going through some sort of training scheme, or like, you know, they're like going through some sort of school of magic, that is absolutely my jam. And the tournament was really, really good. Although, I mean, surprisingly, the book was all about the tournament, but also really not all about the tournament, because the main character is involved, but also doesn't really care at the same time. So there's a lot of, like, I guess, contrasting things that probably wouldn't work as well in other books, but make so much sense if you know the character and understand like the personality and the history. It was an absolute stellar book, I would say.
I would agree, and I think also considering that this is a
Debut
novel, this is what I caught when I edit. I try to cut it out.
And replace it with
Exactly.
No,
we did just
their
come
debut
from the
novel.
from the
pub.
Wow,
Cub.
from the cub.
We went to the Christmas market, had some blue vines, and then went pub, had some beers, and now we're here to
we
record,
are reviewing
unpack,
this,
and fly to England tomorrow. So
well, when I said I had to record the third part, that this is what I meant.
Yeah.
But I was really excited to talk about this novel, and I hope we read more books together in the future.
Yeah, me too.
And
I hope
any
the
last
sequel
thoughts,
of this. Well, hoping for sequels, because you know, there is, again, it's not a romantasy, but lots of relationships with the main character and other people, not as in like intimate, like relationships, but just like their friendships, their familial relationships, all of this sort of stuff. There's lots of very sort of intertangled webs from the main character with other prominent characters in the book, and it's very, I guess, intriguing to me to think about, like, how will this play out in one way or another, because you know, they are kind of all conflict in different ways. So I'm very eager to read any future installments of this series, and I guess I hope they, you know, people, I guess, take a look at this series and write sort of more, not say romancy, but fantasy that's on a bit of a lighter level, because I think I found very few fantasy books that have this much depth with the lack of magic system, I guess, because I think a lot of fantasy books I've read where they're like really in depth, they always have a very well built world, well developed magic system. This had the great world, the great characters. The magic system was kind of took a back seat, but in a really, really good way, which I think is quite uncommon for fantasy. So I'd like to see sort of more of that going forwards, I suppose.
I agree. I would just add, I want to see more animals.
More animals. Always good.
That is what I think.
Yeah, more animals.
More animals.
Just more?
Yeah, just more.
Just
I want to
animals?
see what happens to the little animal. And then I will.
Okay, so hopefully animals all okay.
Yeah. So thank you for joining our little corner.
Cozy corner.
And you will continue seeing me react to other books.
And me coughing or laughing or taking or calling in the background. So always something to interrupt, I think.
No.
But Merry Christmas, have a lovely New Year, and enjoy. Bye.
Then I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. And this was a novel that I had been planning on reading for a really, really long time. I've got it here. Let me pull it out of my shelf, trying to not move anything around and failing miserably. All right. Oh. All right, here it is, Scythe. This is set in a dystopian society where people cannot die. And so these people, the Scythes, are in charge of the task of killing. And this position is quite high up in society. They get to rule over a lot of the politics. And the politics in this novel are actually what drew me in and made me read it in a day. I really, really enjoyed the reading experience of this. Even though it might have not been the most original story in the sense that we do see the dystopian trends that kind of pop up here, I would say the actual plot is quite original. How it approaches death, how it approaches power, who's got the power to kill, who's got the power to live, and how you can abuse those powers if you find yourself having them. So I would highly recommend it if you haven't picked it up yet. I know it was a very popular book back in the 2010s, but yeah, Scythe, very, very good.
And I gave it 4 stars. Important information.
Then I read a quartet of novels that got me on a chokehold. These were if not my favorite books of this year. I will have to go back and do my little list, but they are really high up. I would say top 3 for sure. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about them in these 4 kind of unified quartet, because I wouldn't be able to separate them. And also, why would I if I can just tell you how amazing this series is? And this is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I cannot tell you how long I've been putting off reading these books. I don't know why, because I know that they are a lot of people's favorites, but I just like refuse to read them. And now I honestly don't understand how I could have lived without these books. I really, really loved them. I was enthralled by the story. I kept reading. I kept wanting to be in these characters' perspectives. We get very different people here that are fighting for different ideals, and the way that this is portrayed is expertly done. One of the main characters, Helena, beautiful perspective. Her character arc is one of my favorites of all time, but even the other 2 characters are incredible. Leia and Elias, or Elias. I actually read this, so I didn't listen to the audiobook, so I'm not 100% sure on how to pronounce the characters' names, but I'm very much attached to their story. However, I will say these novels are devastating. These are fantasies set in a world where it's kind of inspired by the Roman Empire, and we do get dynamics between slaves, powerful rulers, and a very, 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 if I didn't say very enough, dark villain. The villain in this novel, it is she, I would say she, because there are 2 villains in this novel, but like there's one villain in particular that is the absolute worst. I've never been so angry when reading something. I was viscerally wanting to punch this woman in the face, because she just does the most horrible things over and over and over. And even though the conclusion of her story wasn't 100% satisfactory, I would say the quartet wrapped up beautifully, and I really did like the conclusion. So what happens to a lot of these trilogies is that they start out really well, and then over time it just kind of keeps deteriorating a little bit. I would say the first book is my favorite of the 4, but then the 4th is also incredible. The 3rd one is really good. The 2nd one is also incredible. The 3rd one would be my least favorite if I had to rank them, but I highly recommend you read this if you haven't yet. We follow Leia, who is part of the scholars group of people that have been either slaved or that work for the other more powerful sections of this society. We also follow Elias, who is a soldier, alongside Helena, who's also a soldier, and they both go to this military academy in order to become what they call a mask, which is like the highest level of this military structure. And everything happens from there. There are so many things, and I honestly cannot go into it too much because it would be a spoiler, but at the very beginning of the novel, Leia's family gets killed in front of her, and then she has got to escape. From there, we then learn that her brother had some drawings that are quite dangerous to the rulers of this society, and the drawings alone could be considered treason. So there's a little bit of intrigue there, and throughout the story we change and we switch perspectives. Though in the first book we mainly focus on Leia, then we start seeing the other characters also develop their own storylines and their own character interactions, but it is honestly brutal. I cried. My heart was broken many, many times while reading this. I kept having to stop reading it because I was just like, this is too much sadness. It is too much despair. I have never read such a harrowing story when you get attached to these characters, but bad things keep happening to them, and you honestly don't know how they're gonna get out of it. So plot armor is not here at all. And yeah, really, really loved this novel. Would highly recommend it. I gave most of the book 5 stars. I think I gave the 4th one 4 stars. But overall, this series is a 5-star series for me, for sure. While I was reading the quartet, I also read some books for university. So I'm not going to go too much in detail about the different theories that I've been reading because they are very theory heavy books, but just to mention a few that I've included in my thesis, and that's why I've been reading them. One of them is called Necropolitics by Membe, and he is a scholar that looks at post-colonialism, or in my case, I consider it decolonialism, where you look at powers of structure and how states that declare themselves a state of sovereignty end up being able to control who dies and who lives, and how that impacts communities, especially if you're in a position and you're subjugated, how you are almost in a state of death in life. Very, very interesting theory. And again, I'm using it for my thesis, so good read. Then I read Contemporary Gothic, which just talks about how the evolution of the Gothic genre has kind of played out. We look at how it began through architecture, and then how it developed into literature, and what it is today, the modern Gothic, which is very different, but maybe also very similar to the ones we had back in the day, and also when it started to create like this popularity around it, which is usually 1800s around that time, but even in the 1700s we also get very important Gothic novels. Then I read The Production of Space by Henry Lefebvre. This also deals with houses, how we produce spaces that we inhabit, but I ended up having to scrape it from my thesis, from my framework, because I'm mostly focusing on the Gothic as a genre and trauma studies. So this one was a little bit too spatial, like spatial theory, for me to actually include it. So I read it. It was really interesting, and I might use it for another paper for my master's, but very theory heavy, very dense. These books tend to be that way. Academics like to be very wordy, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. Then you got The Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard. Again, another kind of space theory pioneer. We get his perspective that it is a much more positive one that we tend to see. He sees space as actually positive, a space where we can dream, where we can develop ourselves. Our childhood home is a reflection of who we are. And then places like a basement is your unconscious, and then as you go up into the attic, things become clearer. So he kind of structurally analyzes the home and creates a topology of psychoanalyzing the home. I found it very helpful when talking about the home as an entity, and especially in Gothic horror, you get a lot of these uncanny homes that take on a life of their own. So it's interesting to see it play out in a more positive way in just literary theory. Then I read The Highly Sensitive Person, How to Thrive When the World Overwhelms You. And the title says it all. It's just a book about HSP, highly sensitive person, or highly sensitive people. And I would consider myself as a very highly sensitive person, but this book wasn't that helpful for me, even though it does take a very interesting psychological approach to HSP. For me, it just felt like I was being told that I was meant to be a certain way, but I wasn't. And just to explain it a little bit, I feel like this one is catered mostly for people who are very shy, who have a hard time kind of getting out of their houses, a little bit of agoraphobia perhaps. And even though I have suffered in the past with a little bit of agoraphobia, I am definitely not shy. And so I felt like when these situations were being described, I just couldn't relate to them. And the self-help approach to focus on spirituality or things like that is just not, it's not my cup of tea. So I ended up giving it 2 stars because it simply just did not reach me. I was maybe not the ideal audience for this. I don't understand why we can't be both, also HSP and extroverted and out there in society, very loud spoken and things like that. So it's interesting to see that again, this stereotype, even though it is a very difficult thing to realize or maybe to identify that you are a highly sensitive person, I really like the way that she described at the very beginning how we can be helpful for society. But also, as somebody who struggles with, crippling anxiety, it's kind of like, okay, I get how I can be helpful, but how do I help myself? So it's interesting, again, to see the perspective that she's putting here in this novel of teaching you about the amount of people that are HSPs that we might not know. I really appreciated the fact that there was a little bit more information about being an HSP. And overall, it wasn't the worst self-help book I've read, of course, but it also wasn't necessarily for me. The last book I read was Unclaimed Experiences, Trauma, Narrative, and History by Kathy Caruth. And this was another one for my thesis. As you can tell, this back end of all the reading that I've been doing is mostly just for my thesis. This was about how we experience trauma. She uses a lot of psychoanalysis to explain how PTSD shows up. It's kind of like an open wound that never closes. The repetition aspect of it, how when you are in the moment, you tend to forget everything that happens, but then when you look back, you might relive it over and over again. And it's a very important and kind of, again, pioneer, essential source for trauma studies. And from there, I've read a lot of articles. I've included other perspectives, but this one was the one that I read almost in its entirety. And the reason why I include some of the books that I've read for my thesis and not others is because for this one, for example, I read almost most of it, but for others, I may just read a few chapters. So that's why I end up including these and not the other ones that I've also been reading, because I've been doing a lot of reading for my master thesis. So these books are just a few of the ones that I've been reading, and that is also why I've read, I guess, less books than in other years, but at the same time, I have read 47 books this year. So I'm happy, and I am excited to keep reading. I am excited to keep talking to you. I hope you pick up any of these books that I mentioned. If you were to pick up any of the books I mentioned in this video, please read The Raven Scholar. Please read the Ember in the Ashes Quartet. And yeah, that's it for me. Happy New Year's. Merry Christmas, everybody. Look at my earrings. They are very much Christmas-inspired earrings. And I will see you soon with another video soon. Bye-bye.